This is Kathy Pichaka. It is February 7th, 2025. I'm sitting here in the genealogy room at Christ Hamilton United Lutheran Church in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania with Don Paynter. Also in the room doing the recording is Rich Weekend. We are here to learn about Don Paynter and his history attending Christ Hamilton. Okay. So Don, let's talk a little bit about your background. If you don't mind me asking, what year were you born?
I was born in 1936, August the 21st,
Okay.
1936.
All right, so that gives us a time frame how far back your history goes.
Yeah.
And where were you born?
Well, I'm the only native actually out of the Paynter family because my brothers and my sister and my mother and father moved up here from Philadelphia in 1935. So what happened was my father had a plumbing business, and of course he went through the Depression and lost everything, and then he put everything he had in storage and couldn't pay the storage and lost that.
Oh.
So they were kind of, down and out. And I have an uncle who moved up to this area, and he said, hey, there's a place available to just be caretakers. So they jumped at the chance and they moved up to McElhaney.
Okay.
And the place, however, was just a two-story log cabin with vinyl siding on it, or wooden siding on it, I mean. And there was no electricity, no phone, no water.
Oh, wow.
There was an outside privy, and my brothers used to carry the water up from the spring, which was, close to about an eighth of a mile from the house.
My goodness.
And all uphill, by the way. And so anyway, it was, the only heat we had in that was a wood stove, and it was very cold. When the wind would blow, you could see everything in the house moving, the wind would blow it.
Yeah.
And so I wound up when I was 4 months old with pneumonia, and they took me into what was a general hospital. It's now Pocono.
Okay.
And it wasn't anything more than a house.
Wow.
I have pictures of it at home. And at that time, I don't think there was any real antibiotics available. I could be wrong about that, but I'm not sure about penicillin. But anyway, I survived that, and then when I was 6 years old, I started school. There was no such a thing as kindergarten in those days. Mm-hmm. They drug you out the door and put you in a bus, and you were there from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. And you better be quiet, or the teacher had a paddle about that wide.
Oh, no.
And so and we had 3 classes in first, second, and third grade, and 1 teacher. And the problem with that was that World War II was just heating up good, and there wasn't many teachers available. So she had 3 classes, which was about 45 kids, I guess. Imagine 1 teacher. And then the next year when I went back, or a couple of years later, I'm not sure which, they added another. So they had the 4th grade she had.
Okay.
And the learning facilities there weren't very conducive to a good education. It was more about not saying anything and being quiet, or she didn't get beat up,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there isn't too much to say about that, as we went through the war years that were very difficult.
I'm sure.
And then when I got out of school, it's funny how the Lord leads you. And I look back on it now, and I just say, wow, I can see these different things that happened. I didn't know what I was going to do. I wasn't trained for anything, and certainly couldn't afford any college. That was, we didn't think about that. And so a friend of mine said, hey, I hear that they're hiring at the National Drug Company. Now that is up there where Connaught's labs are. It might be called something else.
Sanofi.
Sanofi. That has changed hands again.
Yes.
And anyway, that time it was a National Drug Company, and they had been there for a long time.
Yes.
They started out making smallpox vaccines and and the guy that started it, he worked with Pasteur in France. So he came over here and started his own lab, and we built up. We were making a lot of different products, but they hired me on influenza vaccine as a temporary.
Okay.
And after a while, they asked me if I wanted a permanent job, and I said, well, yeah, you know. So they put me on permanent, and then I started, I took courses in microbiology, and I stayed 13 years as a technician. And I made products like DTPs, helped in the manufacture of it, and then there's a lot of processes in the middle, like diphtheria. They would grow it on Vitex, and they would pool it and put it in bottles, and they'd bring it down to me, and I would get rid of all the medias and everything in, and wind up with just the toxoid.
Okay.
And then from that, we would bring it up to a known, called it LF, lethal flocking, and then we'd have maybe from 300 liters, I might have a bottle this high, you know, and but it's very concentrated. And then they would decide what potency they wanted, and they'd add it to pertussis and tetanus. And then I worked on pertussis, I worked on tetanus, diphtheria, influenza, typhoid, cholera, a little bit of cancer research.
Wow.
And so after 13 years, and by the way, after I was only there a little while, I had one job that I was supposed to do, and that was to remove Arabia rabbit brains. And every Wednesday I'd get these, you know, big tubs with just the heads, rabbit heads in them.
Oh my.
And I had to sterilely remove the brains to make a vaccine. And I had to have a helper. Well, I had a helper for a while, and I don't remember what happened. She left. So they asked me who I wanted to help me, and this young lady was there. I thought, here's an opportunity to get to know this lady, who became my wife.
Oh, wonderful.
And she worked there for a few years, and then they got a slow spell, and they laid her off, and then she never went back. And I stayed there 13 years. The problem was I had a lot of responsibility but very little money. And by that time I had 3 children.
Okay.
And I felt I wanted to educate them, and I wouldn't be able to there. So I went to tractor trailer school on my vacation. And it was a 3-week course in Vincenttown, New Jersey, and I took it in 2 weeks, but it doesn't make a truck driver out of you. You know, it teaches you like the safety and the rules and regulations, and make some mechanical stuff and stuff like that. Then you've got to get the experience.
Yes.
So I waited, and about a couple of months later, I got I saw in the paper there was an ad, Redmond Finishing. It's over there where Walmart is now. Redmond Finishing was hiring truck drivers. So I went in and I told them I don't have any experience, but I told them what experience they had. They said, well, we'll put you with another driver over the road. And that's where I got my experience. We were running like from Stroudsburg to Town Creek, Alabama, to New York City, Columbia, South Carolina, Fayetteville, North Carolina, all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did that for about a year and a half, and they were running me so hard that I was afraid I was going to hurt somebody or hurt myself, because they weren't running legal.
Yeah.
So I quit. And then I hauled milk for a little while for C&E in Allentown. And then I got on with Matlack. And I hauled cement for Matlack for the whole eastern seaboard for 10 years. And I hadn't had any accidents. So they were pretty impressed with that. They made a driver trainer out of me.
Okay.
So I used to take the people out when they first hired him for 3-4 days until I passed him. And there was 3 of us, I guess, and we had over 200 drivers.
Wow.
So I did that until 1981, and then 1981 Reagan deregulated the trucking industry, and they just shut the whole thing down, and I lost my job. I got 3 kids in college, and so I was going to go with Consolidated Freight Lines. They were out of Mount Pocono. I had an appointment with them. to start pulling doubles across to Ohio, and I would have got it because I had a good record. And that night my brother called me. He was running a construction company for Broadscope, and he said, do you want to come with me as a construction superintendent? Because see, I built my own home when I was 22, and I had built 2 other homes to pay for that home, so to help. I worked with a carpenter, so I learned something of the trade, you see.
Yes.
So then I went with him, and we were at Broadscope for a year and a half, and I went bankrupt.
Oh boy.
So he said, now it's time to go in business for yourself. So we did. So from 1981 until 2000, I just built houses, banks, stores, apartment houses, and we built about, the best year I had 43 houses and a bank.
That's amazing.
That's a lot of houses.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So then I built a house in up here in Scioto,
Okay.
and I finished it in 1960. We moved in Memorial Day. We were married in '59. We had an apartment, and we were going to church at Mount Pocono or Swiftwater, and that was my wife's church. And so we went to church there for a while, but we realized it's too far to keep traveling all the way up there. We got to get something closer.
Okay.
So we came down to Christ Hamilton to see if we liked it, and we did, because the church we came from was United Church of Christ, and so were we. And there's also the Lutheran congregation here.
Yes, there was.
So, but the thing is, they had been the United Church of Christ and Lutheran in this church ever since they were back in the log cabin in 1775.
Correct.
So they were all pretty well older people, and I could see the writing on the wall. If they didn't get some younger people, they were going to have a problem pretty soon. In 1966, they asked me to serve on the council, and I served on the council with people like Bob Fighting, who was a very smart man.
Yes.
And Billy Walters, who was a navigator for a bomber in World War II. And I served with Chet Anthony.
Yes, I know.
And,
He's in the records as well.
Just, those kind of people. And then, but that was on the UCC side. And then we had joint council meetings, and that would be with the Lutheran congregation. And then we had people like Billy Lotz Sr., that's Bill Lotz's father.
Oh, great.
He sold paint for Sears Roebuck, but he was a smart guy. And he also, I don't know how far back, but in the 30s and 40s, I think, and maybe before, he was a choir director. And so I worked with him, and he was kind of a very nice, amazing young Christian man, or older Christian man. And my wife and I joined here, and when we did, they said Mrs. Yoon, who was
Annette
Sunday school, Annette
Yes.
Yoon, she was one of the Sunday school teacher. Her and Violet Kammer, some of those ladies, and our daughter at that time, our only daughter at the time, she was Anne, was just going on 3.
Okay.
And Annette said, why don't you bring her to Sunday school? And my wife said, oh my goodness, she's so little yet, so young. Oh, that's okay, we'll take care of her. So we let her go. And I think they done something right, because when she was 12, she decided she was going to be a Lutheran minister. And now she's just getting ready to retire. She's in Cleveland. And I don't know how many different churches that she's worked in. She was the Lutheran pastor for the Lutheran church in Worcester, Ohio for 7 years. She worked with her husband in Wadsworth, Ohio for 12 years in a nice big church that was built by the people that make the blue chip match.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
They
had a lot of money, and they pretty well paid for it. And it was like a cathedral in England, or in Europe, built much smaller, And when they had their church services, it was recorded and shown twice a week in Akron. So a lot of people knew them.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so anyway, my wife served on the council for a total of 12 years. And she got on the choir, and she was on the choir for 49 years.
That's here at Christ
Here
Hamilton.
at Christ Hamilton. And she wanted to make 50, but she had Parkinson's, and she just got the point she couldn't do it.
And your wife's name is Ruth Ann.
Ruth Ann.
Ruth Ann.
And so also, we had cookbooks that the church had. They used to sell them.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife was in charge of that. She'd send cookbooks all over the place
Yes.
for a number of years. And then they would, and then she turned the money into the church, you know, and they sold a lot of cookbooks.
Yes, we have a couple in our collection, and also in our collection we have they were called Hamilton Churchwomen HCW, and many of the minutes from their meetings are handwritten by your wife. So I've learned a little bit about her.
Oh yeah, and anyway, so our oldest daughter, as I said, became a Lutheran pastor. In 1963, our daughter Crystal came along, and she got into language, and she studied in Strasbourg, France, for a year and a half. She studied in Ecuador. She was down there twice. I'm not sure for how long. Probably a total of a year or something like that. And she met her husband there, and then also later on Crystal taught at Northampton Community College for 5 or 6 years, and then our son Stephen, he was, when he was 8 years old. I didn't even know he could sing, you know. I never, and anyway, when he was 8 years old, they came around to schools and they checked to see, looking for children that had talent, and they asked him if he would want the Pocono Voice Singers, I think it was called.
Yes, yes.
And
It's Fred Waring, right?
What?
Fred Waring? Was that?
Well, he worked with Fred Waring.
Okay.
But no, it was this Dr. I can't think of his name. A real high, strong guy, you know. But anyhow, then when he got in high school, he was with the Strasbourg Show Choir. And then he went to James Madison University, and he was with the show choir, James Madison. Then he got a full scholarship for the Conservatory of Music in Cleveland, Ohio, and he sang with the Cincinnati Opera. And so then he got to college, and he came home. He wanted to start a music store. He was married by that time.
Yes.
So we started a music store, and it really started to blossom. We had 18 studios, 23 teachers, 500 students. We had sheet music, so we sold keyboards. We had over 1,000 instruments out of the schools. And I built him a house, and then he comes one day and tells me he wants to try out at the Metropolitan Opera. And I was hoping he wouldn't get it. But he did, and you know, he's been there now 24 years, I guess.
Amazing.
He's assistant choir manager there.
Yes.
So that's kind of what happened. But what I wanted to say is that this church was afforded us really stability.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
That when Stephen was this little, we had a choir director named Mrs. Bazowski, and her husband was a general in World War II, and also, well, I won't get into that. I'm just going to say they had another relation that was a friend of mine, Richard Bazowski, but she started working with Stephen, and had him doing small parts in the choir and stuff like that with just a little kid, you know. So I think that helped along.
Yeah.
And I think Crystal's language came around too by some of the people we had some people here that were in teaching and things like that, you know, and principals of schools, stuff like that. And I think that had a great influence on her, you know. And of course Stephen, there was a lot of music here, and he loved that. And I think I got him started. But the church has been very good to us, and I try even yet to do what I can for them.
Yes, you've been an integral part of our church community for a long, long time. And just listening to your life history here is pretty amazing. You have done amazing things here. So, were you baptized out at a church in McMichaels?
No, I was baptized in a church in McElhaney.
Oh, McElhaney.
Now it was a Methodist church, and it's no longer a church now. It is a place where they have people come and stay for weekends. It's right on the McElhaney Road.
Oh, I know what you mean. It's like a bed and breakfast now.
Yes.
Yes.
That's where I was baptized when I was 7 years old.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's pretty old.
Mm.
You know, lucky I made it that long.
And so you told us where you went to school,
Mm-hmm.
and you filled us in about sort of like what your family life was while you were attending Christ Hamilton. So what would you say about what year was that you started coming to Christ Hamilton?
1962.
1962, okay.
Yeah.
And who was the pastor at that time?
Aidan Boner, because we were United Church of Christ. They had two pastors. We had Pastor Zook, I think was a Lutheran pastor at the time, and but we had Aidan Boner, and he baptized. He didn't baptize Ann because we were going to the other church and so she was baptized in Swiftwater. But then Crystal and Stephen were both baptized by Aidan Boner at this church.
Right. So, you pretty much have told me what your earliest memories of your time in this church are. What would you say are your fondest memory of your time at Christ Hamilton?
Well, the fondest memories, of course, were when my children and my wife was very involved. You know, they were into everything. You know, and especially my oldest daughter. You met Ann, I guess.
I did.
But she just came back from Australia, and around New Zealand, and she's just a fireball, and so's her husband, and she always was. She's just little, but she's the dean of the district in Cleveland for the Lutheran Church, and she has always been a joy. All my kids were, but I mean in that area, you know, I always loved that because she was so involved, and Stephen used to sing, and then when he was in the Stroudsburg show choir. He used to bring the whole show choir here once a year, and they would perform.
That's fabulous.
And they'd have a dinner for him, you know. And Crystal was very involved too, but Crystal's always been kind of quiet, and she's a little bit more like my wife, you know. You don't get to know her very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember when Pastor Ritterpush came back for his anniversary here, and Ann had mentioned how he played a significant role in her deciding to become a minister.
Yes.
Yeah, at that time.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah, yeah. So who would you say has been influential in your faith development at Christ Hamilton?
Yeah. Well, you know, I thought about that, and I can't come up with a particular person. I can say there are a number of people, and one of them was my wife. My wife was just a good Christian person, and she always had patience and understanding, and she did a lot in this church. When we had to rebuild pretty much the church because all of the people that were here when we came started to die off pretty quickly, and we finally decided, well, we're going to have to become one church, so we became one Lutheran church, and I was originally UCC also. But my wife worked with Pastor Ritterpush and others, but she wasn't. I mean, she didn't have a job. You know, she always stayed home. You know,
Which
with
is
kids.
a big job.
So she had more time. You know, I was a lot of times I wasn't even in the area. I was away for periods of time, and and David Ritterpush, the thing he renewed everything. He was just a ball of fire too, and we accomplished an awful lot, and people just couldn't imagine how we pulled it up out. I shouldn't say we, I should say they. How they pulled things up out of the. It was starting to disintegrate because we didn't have people. And of course then Ralph came, and then after a while he had Uncle Fred come, and we wound up with over, I guess, 2,000 members till we were done. I think we came a long way.
Yes.
You know, one time when we were, shortly after we were members of this church, we came to an Easter service one Sunday, and there was only 18 people there
Wow.
for an Easter service.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
telling, going from 18 to 2,000.
Yeah.
I had read about that. There was a big transformation when
Oh,
Pastor
my
Riddick
goodness.
was here.
Yes.
Yes, so that we're very thankful for that. So what was your involvement like? Were you involved in Christian education, Sunday school, youth group, Bible study?
Well, when we first came here, they asked us would we want to get involved in Sunday school? We did. And at that time, Florence June Metzger was in charge of ordering and handing out these little things that you wore on your lapel, you know, as to how long you were there. Like you'd get a year and
Oh.
2 years. I think I got one for 5 years. If I look, you know, I still have my. Matter of fact, I thought about bringing them. I forgot it. But you got those pins. So I did attend Sunday school quite a bit, and I read a lot about, and I always have, about Christianity.
Yes.
And so then when, what was that? I kind of lost my train of thought there. Oh, so then after a while, after a few years, they asked me if I wanted to teach Sunday school. So my wife and I taught adult Sunday school for a few years. But that time I was driving, and it was kind of hard for me to prepare
Yes.
for it because I wasn't home, you know. But I did, you know. Yeah, so I taught Sunday school for a while, and I think I was on the worship and music committee about 10 years. I was on the council, I don't know how many times, 4 or 5 times. I was on the property committee
Yes.
more recently. There was a time when I was building the houses that I was very busy, but they had people here that could handle it very well. They didn't need me, you know.
Yeah.
And but then as things begin to get less people and that, I begin to think, well, I should get involved in that.
Get involved again. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. I read, like again, I've been reading a lot of what is in here, and you're very involved in Christ Hamilton, whether especially with council and getting things done and property and so on, as was your family. Did you receive confirmation at that Methodist church where you were baptized?
You know, I never had confirmation.
Oh, okay.
That time they gave you, I forget what they called it. It was something, a faith promise or something like that. That's not the word. But I never had confirmation.
Okay. All right. So you've done, you did some you taught Sunday school for a bit. You were on church council. You were on property committee. Okay. And did you enjoy those experiences?
Oh yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Keep going. Now I know your children are very musically inclined. Did you participate in any musical
I was
activities?
never musically inclined.
Okay.
I did play an accordion at one time, but not well. I could play polkas. But my wife she could go do a concert and then come back and sit down and play it on the piano, you know what I mean? And she never took lessons. I don't know if that's quite true.
Yeah.
I don't think she could read music,
Yeah.
but yeah,
That's
she could just pick it up, you know. And I think that's where they got their
Okay.
talent from.
Yeah. Christ Hamilton, as we talked about, has a very significant history. It's the second oldest church in the county, and at one point in its history, we were called the Mother Church. Since you've been attending Christ Hamilton, what changes stand out to you the most?
Well, first of all, when we came here, there was just a church. We didn't even have bathrooms. We had an outhouse. And so when we built the Covenant House, that was the first thing we wanted to get facilities, you know, to bring things up to date, and we did. I've never been. I wasn't too involved in the lighthouse at that particular time. I was away a lot because of my job.
Yes.
but one of the things I did want to say is, and maybe just getting off track a little bit, but talk a little bit about history, is a lot of people don't realize it, but originally the people, when they were, this was all wilderness up here, and the people were crossing at Smith's Gap, crossing the mountain and coming into Kunkletown.
Okay.
And so they built a log church there. And then eventually that was before we built ours.
Okay.
And then they built a stone church.
I read it.
And then in 1900 they tore that down and built the church you have today. And so they really, it was starting to just move into the area. And then Muhlenberg, he was in charge of getting, I think, and I don't want to get into this too deep because I don't know what I'm talking about, but he was in charge of getting Lutheran worship done, and I'm not sure if it was in eastern Pennsylvania or what the area was.
Yes,
okay,
you're correct.
And he had a man that he went to school with in England, and he got him to be in charge of getting Lutheran Church above the Blue Ridge Mountains, and he worked in this area up here, and back in they started settling in here pretty heavy after 1740 into the area, and of course they met in the barn down the road there, and I used to say that I wasn't 100% sure that they really did meet in the barn because but they may have at first because it was before the French and Indian War.
Yeah, according to our history, I think that's what it says. They
Yes, it does.
At the Bosser barn.
But it just seems to me that if I were living in the area and the Indians were all around here, I wouldn't be in a barn where they could burn the barn down when I'm in it. I'd be in that stone house. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think what happened, I think they did start worship in the barn after I read a little bit more. And I think when things got really bad during the French and Indian War, they started worship in the house, I think. Because it talks about, in the history here, it talks about, it got so there was something like 9 families or something were there at that house because the Indians were starting to attack.
Yes.
And the people don't realize it, but not all of them were church members here, but a number of them were, but they brought people in from over the other side of the mountain to try to help to stave off the Indians. And some of them were killed. And the local people here, there was a mother that they took a bunch of people away, and she couldn't keep up, so they killed her, scalped her and killed her. And then there was farmers over there in that area also that they found them dead and scalped. So it was a total of about 12 people, 10 to 12 people. And I think that's kind of amazing. And he had a young girl who she got so she couldn't keep up either. They were up in toward Wilkes-Barre. I can't think of the name of the place right now. But anyhow, they were trying to get there, and she couldn't keep up, so they killed her.
Very dangerous times.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is these people went through some really tough times, and that's when you start leaning on the church. That's when you know you can't do it on your own. And I think sometimes today maybe we have it a little bit too good, and that's why we don't have the church attendance that maybe you would have had in those days.
When you think about Christ Hamilton's future, what excites you the most?
Well, what excites me is the fact that we're still here.
Yes.
That we have a choir, we have a lot of different programs, we feed the poor, we have blood drives, we do what we should be doing. My concern is that we can't seem to get younger people. And it's the times that we live in, the younger people haven't been introduced to Christianity quite as, there's an awful lot of other things that get in the way. And So I'm a little concerned about the fact that we don't have younger people taking hold here, you know.
Understood. What would you like most to remain the same at Christ Hamilton?
Well, I hope the friendship we have with each other and the things we can do together and have enjoy doing it, and the camaraderie, and I hope that will continue. I think it's a great church to be a part of. Matter of fact, when we had 2,000 people here, I begin to notice that your individuality was beginning to slip away. There was too many people. You couldn't, you know. If you weren't here for a month, they wouldn't even notice you. You know what I mean?
But no, you're right.
Today, if I miss a Sunday, somebody will call me. Are you okay?
Yes.
That's wonderful. You know, and we care about each other.
We have a very good community. Would you like to add anything more before we conclude the interview?
Well, only this I'd like to say is that, as almost redundant, I guess, I would like to see us be able to do what we're doing and do more, and hopefully get more younger people into our church, if there's a way that we can do it, you know.
Yes.
Because the way it is now, there's not very many people, so you get there's a few people you have here doing an awful lot of different jobs, wear a lot of different hats, you know. And I'm getting to the point I'll be 89 in August, so I can't go like I used to, you know, myself.
Yeah.
And so I would hope to see more younger people do that.
Yes. Well, Don Paynter, it has been a joy listening to you,
Well, thank you.
and listening to your memories and giving us so much of the history of Christ Hamilton. And I thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome. So we